One?
Okay, this is Corey.
No, that's fine. So I'll be looking down at the... good afternoon. My name is Corey Peters. I'm the co-founder of the Calgary Secular Church. I'd first of all, before I forget, like to thank all the organizers who put this event together. Religion has dominated the morality conversation for as long as anyone can remember. Most people don't even know that secular or non-religious ethical systems exist. Well, they do exist, and they're surprisingly robust. In fact, as I'll argue today, they're superior to religious ethical systems. First, briefly, what is ethics? Fundamentally, ethics is about reducing pain and increasing happiness. To the extent that an object has the ability to experience pain and happiness, that is the extent to which we have an ethical obligation towards that object. I care greatly about humans. I care a lot about the animal kingdom. I care almost nothing for the humble virus, and I have no ethical obligation towards rocks. Second, since most people have never even heard of a secular ethical system, let's outline a simple one based only on our one assumption, that ethics are about pain and happiness. We'll call this ethical system universal utilitarianism, and it goes as follows. Always minimize both actual and potential suffering. Always maximize both actual and potential happiness. And I'll say that again. Always minimize both actual and potential suffering. Always maximize both actual and potential happiness. This brief sentence contains the framework for a robust ethical system. In fact, its simplicity is part of its strength. When faced by an ethical dilemma, one does not need to sift through numerous quotations or struggle to comprehend edge cases in a doctoral thesis to know what behavior should be taken. One simply thinks, will my action reduce real or potential suffering? Will my action increase real or potential happiness? That's it. The next time you're confronted by a situation you are not familiar with, try applying this sentence to it. I think you will be pleasantly surprised. One thing that is immediately apparent about this ethical statement is that no religion, superstition, or God is required. We simply acknowledge that pain and happiness exist. The rest springs forth. Secular ethics have several advantages over religious ethics. The most important advantage is that secular ethics are evidence-based. The tenets of universal utilitarianism were selected because the evidence suggests living things prefer happiness to suffering. More than this, if some action is seen to be moral, for example, the keeping of slaves in America in the early 19th century, we can change based on the evidence. For example, the horrible plight of the black slaves. Religious ethical systems failed in this regard because, in the example of American slavery, Christian slave owners maintained the ethical nature of slavery by pointing to the extensive passages in the Bible where slave ownership was outlined, regulated, and promoted. No one who follows universal utilitarianism can object to demoting slavery from an ethical to an unethical position. The evidence is clear. Now, I don't want to spend a great deal of time on the failings of religious ethical systems, but in order to paint a complete picture, some mention must be made. And I also will apologize that I will focus mainly on Christianity, for it is the religion most common in our culture and the one most familiar to Canadians. The criticisms are true of other religious ethical systems as well, in concept, if not in detail. A large problem with religious-based ethical systems is the conflicting source material. For example, the Bible freely advocates the death penalty for talking back to your parents in one portion, and then commands us to forgive in another portion. Which do I choose? Should I insist my wife submits to me, as the Bible clearly dictates? Or should I love her as my equal, as the Bible also clearly dictates? It is a logical impossibility for all these commands to be true, as they directly contradict each other. Unfortunately, Almost every possible behavior is condoned at least once in the Bible, and many evil behaviors are never outlawed. A list of evil done in religion's name, if compiled, would make you weep. But maybe, in practice, religious ethical systems have fared better. Let's look at a few recent ethical questions that have come up and see how religious ethical systems have measured up. Gay rights is an issue of our times. As a follower of universal utilitarianism, I believe everyone should have equal rights, including the right to marry, to choose who you want to be with, who you can fall in love with. However, there has been strong, sometimes violent resistance to equal rights for homosexuals. Without exception, this opposition has come from religious people for religious reasons. In many countries, being a homosexual is a crime. In some places, it is a crime punishable by death. All of these countries are highly religious. Another example, mixed-race marriage was made legal in the US in 1967, and it took a Supreme Court ruling to make it so. Opposition to mixed-race marriage was almost entirely led by religious people for religious reasons. Religious ethical systems have clearly failed our society in these two regards, and that's only going back 50 years. Now that we've outlined some strengths of a secular ethical system and some weaknesses of religious ones, let's do a simple test, comparing a biblical religious system with a secular one. The Ten Commandments are often quoted as the definitive example of biblical morality. After all, this is the one time that God chose to physically write something himself on stone. It must be of earth-shattering import. The Ten Commandments have been memorized by children, posted on churches, and in the US, increasingly in front of courthouses. Let's see what sort of wisdom they give us. Thou shalt not have no other gods before me. Thou shalt make no graven images. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord in vain. Remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Honor thy father and mother. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not covet. The first thing we notice is that the first four offer no ethical instruction at all. They are simply an ancient God asserting his primacy. It's too bad that one of these, say, remember the Sabbath and keep it holy, couldn't have been replaced with something that Christians got so crashingly wrong, like, thou shalt not keep slaves. The world would have been a better place. Of the remaining six, three of them, thou shalt not kill, steal, or lie, are hardly groundbreaking. Every ancient and modern society shares taboos against killing, stealing, and lying. Honor thy father and mother, and thou shalt not commit adultery may have some use, but are hardly robust ethical statements. What if your father physically assaults you? Should he still be honored? Apparently. Finally, thou shalt not covet, a thought crime, isn't even possible. No one can control their mind so effectively as not to break this commandment. In addition, the desire to have what others have and to make yourself better has powered countless improvements in our own lives. The Ten Commandments are just the tip of the iceberg as far as biblical ethical instruction goes. We are told in various places to kill witches, females who are not virgins on their wedding night, anyone who works on a Sunday, people who get tattoos, the list goes on. Fortunately, most Christians don't do what the Bible commands them anyway. They are happy to say that God is love and ignore the parts where God was very much not love. They say that Jesus brought peace, ignoring the parts where Jesus said he brought a sword. The ironic thing is that when religious people think about their moral systems, they think they get them from religion. But what they have done is taken the prevalent secular morality and wrapped it up in their religion. How do we know this? If we could go back in time 500 years, the medieval Christians they would meet would not recognize the ethical system of a modern Christian, even though, theoretically, they both got them from the same place. Medieval Christians would have no problem with lowering a bag of live cats into a fire just for fun, or burning an old woman who was accused of being a witch, or trembling in fear during a lightning storm, lest God should smite them. Modern Christians forget that 40 years ago, homosexuals weren't real people, that 100 years ago, women weren't real people, and that 150 years ago, Africans weren't real people. This change is a good thing. Most Christians and religious people in our country are thinking, reasonable people doing what they know is right in spite of their religion. We have come a long way towards a more ethical, more secular morality, and our world is a much richer place for it. We have a long way yet to go. Let's compare these biblical 10 commandments with the new 10 commandments, as written by Adam Lee and used by the Calgary Secular Church. If you should happen to visit us on the last Sunday of the month, and you are all welcome, these are the commandments that will be taught to you. These new commandments require no deity to be effective, only empathy and a desire to learn about our world. Now, as I read these, imagine your children going to school each day with these on the tips of their tongues, buried in their hearts. Imagine how incredibly more useful they are to living a good life than the biblical 10 commandments. 1. Do not do to others what you would not want them to do to you. 2. In all things, strive to cause no harm. 3. Treat your fellow human beings, your fellow living things, and the world in general with love, honesty, faithfulness, and respect. 4. Do not overlook evil or shrink from administering justice, but always be ready to forgive wrongdoing freely admitted and honestly regretted. 5. Live life with a sense of joy and wonder. 6. Always seek to be learning something new. 7. Test all things. Always check your ideas against the facts and be ready to discard even a cherished belief if it does not conform to them. 8. Never seek to censor or cut yourself off from dissent. Always respect the rights of others to disagree with you. 9. Form independent opinions on the basis of your own reason and experience. Do not allow yourself to be led blindly by others. And 10. Question everything. These new 10 commandments are divided into two major categories, the moral 5 and the intellectual 5. In the moral 5, we start with the golden rule. It is the most robust and excellent tool ever devised by humanity for knowing how we should treat other humans. Quoted by moral philosophers and sages long before Jesus uttered it, it has truly stood the test of time. It is noticeably absent from the Old Testament 10 Commandments. The rest of the moral 5 then describe our relationship to the world around us and to ourselves. These commandments acknowledge that the greatest wonder is that we exist at all, that we have this brief shining moment to look up at the stars and marvel. We are the universe, contemplating itself. We therefore have a responsibility to use this time we have been given to wonder, to learn, to work, and to live in joy. And we cannot sit idly by, waiting for God to bring justice. No, it is our duty. For justice delayed is justice denied. The intellectual 5 commandments guard us in turn from dogmatism, in whose name the greatest crimes of history have been committed, and from self-deception, from cutting ourselves off from the world, and from holding anything too sacred. The beauty of these commandments is ensured by the 10th commandment, which bears repeating. Wait for it. Question everything. Only by continued inspection can we be assured of living the most ethical life possible. These new 10 commandments provide real, practical advice that is useful every day and serve to make better people, better societies, and a better world, and they do it in a way vastly superior to the biblical 10 commandments. None of these new 10 commandments require a deity or the supernatural. Finally, let's briefly deal with some common objections to a secular ethical system. 1, you can't be good without God. Well, we've just shown this to be false. In fact, we've just outlined an entire ethical framework that is demonstrably superior to religious ethics and requires no deities. More than this, I know hundreds of people who don't believe in God, and they are no less moral than people who do believe in God. And let's think this objection through. If you believe you can't be good without God, do you really believe that should a simple but complete proof that God doesn't exist be found, you would begin to rape, lie, and kill? Are you really just good because someone is watching you? That's not good. That's cowardice. Objection 2. Secular ethics have no foundation. The criticism here is that you must have an outside force to determine what is right and wrong. But proponents of this view haven't thought it through very much. In fact, this objection was answered about 2,400 years ago by Plato in what is called Euthyphro's dilemma. It goes like this. Is what is morally good commanded by God because it is morally good? Or is it morally good because it is commanded by God? If God commanded it because it is morally good, then moral goodness exists outside of him. For example, if God says, don't kill, because killing is fundamentally evil, then killing is evil, whatever God says, whether God says it is or not. We don't need a God to tell us. On the other hand, if it is morally good because God commands it, then there is no reason or intelligence behind being moral. It's simply the random decision of a capricious supreme being. Fortunately, God decided killing was bad instead of good. What if he'd gone the other way? Secular ethics has no such problem. Our foundation is our ability to observe pain and happiness, to experience empathy, to share in our experience. All of these things are observable, factual, real, present. No other thing is required. And finally, 3, atheists are evil and I don't like them. Atheists hear this a lot, and they try to make jokes about it, but it is offensive and wrong. There is no factual causation or correlation to be made between atheism and evil. It is a terrible lie, which purpose is to dehumanize any individual who has the temerity to simply acknowledge reality. It must stop. When I was a child, we always held hands around the kitchen table before each meal and offered thanks to God for the food we were about to eat. Now, bearing in mind that my mom would have been a much more reasonable person to thank, as she had prepared it, there is a certain appeal to this daily habit. At my house, we now say the following. We are the stuff of stars. We embrace our responsibility as thinking beings to reduce pain and suffering, to increase beauty and happiness as best we can. Guided by reason and evidence, let us make the world a better, more deeply fulfilling place until that day our bodies return to the stars. This small paragraph embodies a wealth of teaching and is completely non-religious. So, regardless of your personal religious beliefs, try it out at your house. I think you'll like it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Corey. Well, it's been pointed out to me that I have access to the internet on my phone. I emailed myself the introductions and the bios. I apologize. And now I can actually use them. So our next speaker is going to be Jeff. Jeff, where are you? So of course he's not going to be on my page. It's going to make it more difficult for me. All right. Oh, come on, this stupid thing. Well, according to this, Jeff, you're not on here. Jeff says he's 49 and you never know it. He went to the school of hard knocks. He was brought up in a religious family, I believe. Negative. He is a Christian, and he is here to say that morality will go downhill without God or without religion. So now, Jeff.
Thank you, Laura.
Oh, do you want to just hold it?
Yeah, sure. Holding is fine. Well, actually, no, that is probably a better
That's 3.
idea.
I got 2 more to go.
Okay, one way or another. Anyhow, I was going to open by apologizing for the fact that I'm going to read my speech, but apparently we're all doing that, so it's not a great big deal. But I found out I was doing this a day and a half ago, so I didn't have time to commit it to memory. But can there be morality without God? Well, that, of course, depends on one's definition of morality and on the question of the reality of God. Now, assuming that God exists and is in fact the God of Judeo-Christian history, then we can know from Scripture that our righteousness, our own self-generated morality, is as filthy rags in His eyes. So even if you're living the life of Mother Teresa without God, even on your best day you don't stack up, because God's standard is perfection and none of us measure up. That's why we need a Savior. So I maintain that we can't be moral enough for God without God. That's a given in light of Scripture. But can we be moral without God? That's the question. And of course the answer depends on one's definition of morality, which without some kind of foundation is actually rather fluid. Now, morality is above our laws, but it's also inseparable from our laws. We're not legally required to help a little old lady across the street, for instance, but we are legally prevented from running her down if she doesn't get out of our way fast enough. And I have news for you, we're prevented from doing so because our laws are based on Roman laws, which were themselves based on the 10 Commandments, one of which is thou shalt not kill little old ladies for holding up your day. Now, this might surprise you, but not all countries have the benefit of that foundation. In some countries, laws aren't based on the 10 Commandments, or even on what's good for our fellow man or for society, but what's good for the party in power and the fulfillment of their agenda. I'm thinking specifically about communist countries where the overriding objective is to produce a socialist paradise, and if tens of millions of people happen not to share those goals, that's okay, because they can be eliminated. And they can be eliminated because without a moral foundation to tell you differently, it's easy to come to the conclusion that the ends, in this case the creation of a perfect socialist paradise, justifies the means, in this case the slaughter of those who stand in the way of fulfillment of that outcome. You see, it's all very logical in a twisted world without God, and it sounds crazy, but this has unfortunately been a reality in parts of our world in the not very distant past. You see, folks, without God, anything goes. Without God, it's okay to kill millions of people who don't share your agenda, because without God, there's no 10 Commandments, and thus no thou shalt not kill. Aborting children because they're suspected of having a cleft palate or Down syndrome, that's okay too, without God and His Word, which instructs us to defend the defenseless irrespective of their physical condition. So I maintain that one can be moral without God. So I do maintain that one can be moral without God to an extent. You don't have to be a God-fearing Christian, Jew, or Muslim to help a little old lady across the street. But you can't be moral enough for God without God. And the reality is that what passes for morality in an increasingly godless society is destined to become increasingly depraved. The bar is steadily lowered. As a case in point, I'll end with this, but when our morality was shaped by Scripture in society, it was considered immoral for two men to voluntarily remove themselves from the gene pool and be joined in a conjugal relationship. Today, of course, society not only celebrates that relationship, but the marriage commissioner who chooses not to personally participate in it risks censure and losing his job, his or her job. So I return to the question, can we be moral without God? The answer, of course, is yes to a degree, but the definition of morality in His absence becomes increasingly debased. In the new, evolving, godless society in which we live today, one might in fact help a little old lady across the street, only to then help her up the stairs into the infirmary where she'll be euthanized because she's no longer deemed to be of value to society. And that, friends, I believe, is precisely where we're headed as a society without God in the picture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Appreciate that insight. Okay, so if anyone was reading Facebook this morning, they know I posted that we have a special guest today, like a special speaker. And this special speaker is Gabor Zinner, who is actually the founder of Speaker's Corner. He is not representing Speaker's Corner with his speech today. He's speaking as a member of the public. He has been engaged in the private practice of law in Calgary since 1977 and received his postgraduate in legal education at McGill University in Montreal, and part of it, his education at the University of Kent in English. He has a BA, an MA, a BCL, and an LLB. Missing part of the alphabet there, dude. He has extensive litigation experience in a number of diverse areas and has argued at all levels of court, including the Supreme Court of Canada. He speaks several different languages and is a founding member of founding member and secretary of the Canadian-Hungarian Cultural Association in Calgary and the Leadership Forum, of which he is currently one of the directors. He was a member of 6 water polo championship teams, 6 total, 3 junior, 3 senior, which exposed him to international championship. He continues to compete internationally in the Masters water polo player in World, European, and U.S. championships. I now call Gabor Zinner to the microphone.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, that's fine. Well, Corey spoke so eloquently and persuasively in support of the cause that I'm reminded of the expression that when the nightingale sings, the sparrow remains silent. But just the same, I have few words. So when I first looked at the question, can morality exist without God or religion, with a view to responding in the affirmative, namely that it can, I was struck by how biased and presumptuous the question is. I say this because the history of civilization shows that the greatest immorality, both in terms of scale and gross indecency, has been perpetrated in the name of God and religion. I submit that the immorality practiced in the name of God and religion has been so overwhelming that mere moral neutrality on the part of non-believers would place them in a morally superior position. In my view, the immorality of religion started with the founder of the three of the more entrenched and influential religions of the world. I refer to Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And of course, I speak of the founder Abraham, or Ibrahim, as he is called by the Muslims, who taught fanatical and murderous devotion by conduct that by today's psychiatric standards would fairly be classified as psychopathic, delusional, and perhaps paranoid. He lifted his knife in readiness to murder his son Isaac, bound to an altar on the basis of a voice in his brain demanding that he sacrifice the lad. He was about to put the knife through the heart of the boy when he heard another voice, this time the angel of God, calling off the infamy upon being satisfied that Abraham was sufficiently devoted by murdering his son. I would submit that the ideological genesis for the multitudinous murder and mayhem on the planet perpetrated in the name of a fanatical devotion to a so-called God is to be found in the Bible, God, and religion. When Islamist terrorists sacrifice their lives as so-called martyrs while wreaking havoc, death, and destruction upon thousands of innocent people under the doctrine of the jihad, the divine duty to wage war against non-believers or apostates, victimization in the name of God claims both the innocents and the misguided so-called martyrs. The immorality, in my view, is self-evident, even though it is perpetrated in the name of piety. A similar immorality was waged by the Christian crusaders of the Middle Ages against the indigenous populations of the Middle East. The scale of the murder and violence perpetrated in the name of Allah, as for example in the 9/11 debacle, was possessed of a level of immorality which was vastly surpassed by some of the other examples that I wish to put in front of you. Christian believers in Europe and North America, as Corey pointed out, would burn women at the stake, mostly single and socioeconomically disadvantaged women, because they were seen as witches. I would submit that this theologically based, institutionalized torture and murder amounted to an obscenity which was immoral in the extreme. The conquistadors of Spain, who raped, plundered, and pillaged the territories of South America, all the while decimating the indigenous populations under the approving eyes of the Catholic clergy, which benefited amply from the bounty, may be seen by modern eyes as immoral, thieves, and murderers. Immorality. This immorality was also the case with the European ravage of Africa, which was compounded by the hypocritical fiction that their mission was to civilize the native populations that they were butchering and looting in the most brutal ways. The church and the Bible were the handmaidens of the abuse and exploitation, much in the name of God and Christ. The hypocrisy was wryly pointed out by African leaders trying to shake off the yoke of colonialism, who observed that before the white man came, we had the land and they had the Bible. Now, they have the land and we have the Bible. The inhumane kidnapping, overseas transportation, and cruel enslavement of millions of Africans appeared not to offend the morality of those who espoused God and religion, all with great piety. What became of religious morality when the German state, consisting of practicing Christians, embarked upon the genocidal campaign of dispossessing, enslaving, torturing, and exterminating 6 million Jews and other so-called vermin, such as gypsies and homosexuals? Where was the voice of the Pope, the Vicar of Christ, condemning the atrocities? How did God and religion inform on the morality of the butchers and the silence of the Pope? And the list goes on. It's not politically correct these days to refer to persons as perverts. What then is the proper description of a middle-aged man of the cloth who is a sexual predator of children of both sexes of tender years? We see these creeps caught time and again. How did God and religion shape their morality? Can it be suggested that in some, if not many instances, the teachings of the church and its morality, including the virtue of celibacy or the suppression of natural urges to mate and marry with women, resulted in the immorality that causes us to cringe? The cruelty and horrors visited upon the native populations of Canada in the residential schools, for which the Prime Minister of Canada recently had to apologize, is yet another instance of vulgar immorality. As we know, many, if not most of these institutions were administered by the clergy, who got their moral teaching through religion, of course. So, can morality exist without God or religion? Please. The more appropriate question, in my view, based on results, is to what extent can religious instruction ever be reliably looked at as a basis for moral conduct? As for the proposition that morality can indeed be formulated and enforced without appeal to religion, I would say firstly that proper moral precepts can be grounded in considerations of fairness, decency, and the pragmatic requirements of maintaining social order. Hearkening back to the three of the 10 commandments: thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness. These 3 of the 10 commandments, for example, are 3 pillars for a peaceful and ordered society. They appeal to our natural sense of what is right and wrong, and they're also enshrined in the criminal code. The Criminal Code of Canada speaks very clearly to this without any appeal to religion or morality. They are enforced by the state. Contract law, for example, and bankruptcy law create and enforce commercial morality, all for the greater good and without reference to God and religion. Tort law prescribes that it's not okay to assault, batter, run down, or defame people, and that transgressing against these laws will result in punishable consequences. Again, without any appeal to any higher moral or religious authority. The same is true for securities law, where investors are protected against scamsters and fraudsters. And the list goes on and on and on. There's an entire host of municipal regulations, for example, which impose duty upon builders to not put together flimsy homes which will collapse on the purchasers' heads in a year. The Divorce Act, the Matrimonial Property Act, the Dependent Relief Act, these all legislate morality in terms of proper conduct within the home and the family. The duty to support children, a fair distribution of assets between spouses upon dissolution of marriage, and many other issues relating to domestic justice. We have legislated morality. As a society, we resonate common values which embrace decency and pragmatism, all without reference to God or religion. We function well. In a secular realm, we have laws and social norms which allow us to function peacefully and effectively, all the while avoiding some of the excesses, immorality, brutality, and obscenity propagated in the name of God and religion. I'm often reminded, I'm coming to the end by the way, of Marx's, before the timekeeper shuts me off, I'm often reminded of Marx's astute observation that religion is the opiate of the masses. Needless to say, the atheist does not believe in the existence of a God. If the atheist premise is correct that there is no God, then any and all morality in the world has been entirely a product of human invention. In conclusion, I submit that morality can and does exist without God or religion, but that the history of the world has shown that religion has failed to produce and enforce a morality that has created peace, order, and good government, or which has protected the millions upon millions of innocent victims of abuse, exploitation, and carnage. In contrast, the most heinous crimes, including torture, looting, and genocide, have been justified by an appeal to God and religion. Secular legislated morality, on the other hand, has embodied, for example, in the laws of Canada, a set of moral precepts which provides an enduring foundation for a peaceful, prosperous, and tolerant society. If anyone out there wishes to explore these ideas, set out with much greater scholarship and eloquence than I can ever hope to muster, I strongly recommend that you check out a book called The God Delusion by Richard Dawkins, and another by Christopher Hitchens called God is Not Great: Why Religion Spoils Everything. Thank you very much.
Let's just do it the easy way. Thank you very much, Gabor. Now we call upon our last speaker, Steve. If I can find his bio. They told me I could get the internet on my phone. They forgot to tell me what a pain in the ass it is. My apologies for my language. So Steve attended Capilano College. Did I say that right, Steve? Capilano College. He is a Microsoft certified professional with a BCIT system information. He was introduced to church services as a young child, and he grew up questioning faith, and the question that was most often elicited was most controversial, is how do we prove there is a God? Steve is not afraid to assert and expose the belief that a God, regardless of heritage, faith, or belief, can exist, and that to be moral requires the existence of a higher being. Mr. Elliott worked in the IT field, and as Mr. Elliott, works in the IT field, he has exposed himself to a constant barrage of linear ideas and logic. He understands and acknowledges the relationship between faith and absolute science. Science is rarely clearly understood, and those without scientific knowledge, therefore, it lacks a clarity during communication and cannot convey absolute objectivity to the layman. Religion involves the belief that an energy beyond the quantitative capture required by science cannot be fully explained by scientists. He allows free rein for all to believe. I now call him to the speak.
Thank you, Aaliyah. Yep, good enough. Yep. Like everyone else, I'm going to refer to notes. I'd like to thank all those who opposed me for coming today and expressing their beliefs and theories. It's an honor to speak here today and share my views with such a strong adversaries. Thank you all. We're here today to discuss the question, can morality exist without God or religion? And it's my position that morality is tied to God and religion and cannot be separated. Immanuel Kant, a German philosopher, exposed an argument for the existence of God where he stated that no successful argument for God's existence arises from reason alone. Kant's argument revolves around happiness and virtue. He contends that because we cannot ensure that virtue always leads to happiness, there must be a higher power. Who has the power to create an afterlife where virtue can be rewarded by happiness, thus forming belief? Objective moral values stem from the subject of God's existence, which is the ontological basis of this topic today. If God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist. Objective moral values do exist because we're here talking about them. Therefore, God exists. The thought being that moral values are associated and tied to God as he is the author, there can only be one author. Traditionally, atheists have acknowledged that God is a necessary condition of objective moral values, i.e., the sort of moral truths that are discovered rather than invented by humans, and which are valid and binding whether anybody believes in them or not. Therefore, a spiritual being, supernatural being, is defined as an incorporeal being believed to have powers to affect the course of human events. This must be an unknown force. Atheists suggest that it is possible to detach moral objectivity from any religious worldview. This would mean that there's a plan in place to support the possibility. Where's the executive summary on this? Atheists suggest that it is possible to detach. Remember, God influences our decisions and shapes our moral compass. How often do we get an intuition or that gut feeling? Even atheists experience this. When driving, I better slow down. Something is telling me there's a cop around the corner. And sure enough, there is. Why did our internal compass kick in telling us to follow the right moral path? I'd like my colleagues to answer this and attempt to debunk the presence of an unknown force. What allows it to flow through us? Could it be that it's an invisible energy that authors the boundaries which our gut listens to? Perhaps an atheist can answer these questions. What good can come from removing morality's existence from religion? Why is the statement, "Oh God, we trust," written into the US Constitution? Do atheists believe they can be as good or evil as believers? Can morality be quantifiably measured? I have set up an easel, set out here, it's okay. I asked few people to provide some suggestions to what they believe is the ultimate good, and 3 or 4 to offer what they believe is the ultimate bad. This will show us what we believe are the boundaries for morality from a scientific viewpoint. So how many suggestions do we have? If there are more than one on either side, we have a problem in quantifying morals scientifically. There's also the issue some religious laws are immoral, and we may be better off without these laws. I agree from a fairness and ethical standpoint. This allows that individuals make choices and can be good or bad regardless of what side of the fence you're on. I have some questions up here. Refer to question 3. Why is the expression, "oh God," often used when practicing the creation of life, as well when nearing life's end? During an act of sex, "oh God" is often expressed with conviction and absolute truth, making the act true and good. When facing death, it's often heard the same words, when knowing this event is wrong, untimely, and unfair. Therefore, the belief in God proves that right and wrong exists. Thus, without God, it doesn't. Belief is a type of disposition. It isn't necessary for a belief to be constantly and consciously manifested. We all have many beliefs which we are not aware of. There may even be some beliefs which some people never consciously think about. But to be a belief, there should at least be the possibility that it can manifest, therefore meet the challenge of truth. The issue today is trying to separate morality from one side of the fence, so to speak, and show that morality is not connected to religion and can stand on its own. Bertrand Russell, British philosopher, logician, mathematician, once said, "We have, in fact, two kinds of morality, side by side. One which we preach but do not practice, and another which we practice but seldom preach." This statement uncovers the belief that two moralities exist, and if the theist were to accept quantum physics and allow the atheist to remove morality from one side, theories in physics tell us about mirror imagery. This would in effect cancel out morals from atheists too. And since the atheist would always know that morals were removed, they would always exist in the mind of the atheist. Hence, they would exist. If the atheist believes there are two moralities, this says that morality is a form of matter, which cannot be removed from existence. Remember, objective moral values exist. Therefore, God exists. The Oxford Dictionary says belief is the acceptance that something exists or is true, especially one without proof. It's also defined as trust, faith, or confidence in someone or something. Atheist Russ Schaefer-Landau acknowledges that, in my experience, people tie objectivity to God because of a very specific line of thought. The basic idea is that all laws, rules, principles, standards require a lawmaker. So if there are moral laws, then these too require a lawmaker. But if these moral laws are objective, then the lawmaker can't be one of us. That's just true by definition. Objectivity implies an independence of human opinion. Therefore, morality cannot be disconnected from religion, as religion believes in a higher being, who Mr. Schaefer-Landau acknowledges must be the maker and conductor of those morals. An atheist can argue that hypocrisy in the Bible displays poor moral fiber within religion. I do concede that because individuals on both sides of the fence can be good or bad, that it can only stand to reason that it's possible that a morally decayed person could have contributed to some entries in the Bible, which offer poor direction. This does not prove that religious morality is questionable, but rather flawed, meaning even God makes poor choices, like creating Satan and not keeping a close eye on him, or letting things on earth get so out of hand that he had to wipe the slate clean and start over. As science points out, all matter exists. If moral truth is a matter, then it has to exist. Desmond Tutu said, "This is a moral universe, and you've got to take account of the fact that truth and lies and goodness and evil are things that matter." As pointed out earlier, not believing in science and its foundations would remove morals for atheists. As pointed out earlier, it may be said that animals have been observed acting with morality. Animals can display a moral compass, speculating that as animals have a reduced frontal lobe necessary for advanced reasoning, they cannot believe in religion or God. Therefore, morality does not require religion. As a wise friend pointed out to me, it is not only man's arrogance that is assuming what animals can and cannot believe. If man possesses intuition, is it not possible the same is within animals? As described by the science of neurology, the frontal lobes are the regions of the brain that provide for ideas and letting this notion guide our future and behavior. It may be our frontal lobe which is getting in the way of understanding our true moral compass. Mark Rowlands is a Welsh writer and professor of philosophy. He wrote a book called Animals Are Moral Creatures. He is documented in saying, "I think what's at the heart of the following morality is emotions," proposing that it could be the emotions we humans are interpreting as morals. Emotions bring us back to the subject at hand. What do we feel about cutting ties with our original author, who so eloquently provides us with our abilities? Now, in conclusion, while many atheists grant the existence of a connection between objective moral values and the existence of God, a significant number of atheists endorse moral objectivism. The quandary is likely to be cyclical and throughout generations, and to be continued through the existence of mankind due to our frontal lobes. What can be proven is that existence and acceptance of morality is in the hands of atheists and theists alike. Richard Dawkins, a well-known atheist, has been criticized with the approach of impatience towards religion, as such that he is not really disposed to weigh carefully any arguments in its favor, which is obviously the very reason, or the very reverse, of a philosophical frame of mind, which is critical for debunking theories. Now bear in mind, we are human and subject to a reality as seen by ourselves, which include the belief of unknown or unexplained force or energy, which allows us to abide by the morals set out by the underlying belief, which is impossible to disprove, since it's our own reality. Removing morality from religion would effectively remove the reality we've accepted by atheists or theists. Atheist Russ Schaefer-Landau concedes that moral laws are objective and that the lawmaker can't be any one of us. Science can't quantify morals because new degrees of morals are introduced constantly with the ever-increasing number of people, as we've seen. I want you to listen very carefully to this. Morality is untouchable by any human. Therefore, it cannot be removed unless we remove the reality of how we see ourselves. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Steve. Well, there you have it, folks. Those were our 4 speakers today. Now we're going to open this mic up to public debate, so you can have your say on whether you feel strongly one way or the other. You have your right to say what you wish. We just ask that you keep it non-inflammatory. No explicits. We will allow 1 or 2, but you will be cut off. We're giving everyone 3 to 5 minutes, and if anyone wishes to come up, if they could just come on over here and come on up. Come on, don't be afraid, guys.
I'm always first. I don't want to be first.
Nobody wants to have a say on this debate. Nobody thinks...
I don't want to be first. I'm always first.
Well, you have an opinion, do you, sweetie pie? The dogs have spoken. If only we could understand it. Meryl, come on up. You might as well.
Trying to be humble.
That's okay. I also wanted to mention that we have some boxes set up with the nice bright green. These boxes have some forms with them. We would love to hear from you what you think about what's taking place today. If you have any opinions or suggestions on things that you feel should be covered at Speaker's Corner, this format is for the public. That is why we are out here. And so now I'll give the mic over to Meryl. Thank you.
No, I'm okay. You know, I wrote a lot of notes, and as a Christian, I really had to sit back and listen to what Gabor and Corey had to say. And I can say it touched my heart to a certain extent, because today as a Christian, if I could possibly go across the world and back in time and apologize and do some recompense for the evil that people have done in God's name, I would. But as you both know, I can't. Neither will I be able to completely absolve myself of all the sins that I have done in my lifetime. Believe me, there's been many. I've never killed anyone. I've never killed anyone, although I've assisted in having people killed. I defended Henry Morgentaler for a number of years, was his clinic escort in Calgary. We should remember that Henry Morgentaler was a secular humanist. He belonged to the Humanist Society of Canada. And he had no qualms about seizing an unborn child out of the womb and chopping it into pieces and making $1 million a year in doing it. And yet he was a hero in our eyes. So as many examples as my brother Gaber and others bring and give of evil done in the name of Islam, Christianity, you name it, he's right. He nailed it right on the head. But the problem is, and a little bit comes from what Jeff said, if that is right, and if because what Gaber said is right, that we abandon the idea that there is a God, then what do we have left? And let me permit me in the next few minutes I have to give you a few examples. Vladimir Lenin, the founder of the Communist Revolution in Russia, when speaking to the young communists, he said to them, "Do communists have morals?" He says, "Of course we do. Our morals are subordinated to the interests of the proletariat." Now, when your party is the leader of the proletariat, and you are the leader of the party that is the leader of the proletariat, then what does that mean? That means people are put up against the wall and shot without trial, and on it went for 60 years in the Soviet Union. People like to say that Stalin was an abrogation of Lenin. What's that? Okay, I won't go too long, though. Thank you, though. Thank you. That's okay. People like to say that Stalin was an... Jeff, do you mind? People like to say that Stalin was an abrogation of Lenin, when in fact, if you read Leninism and you read Stalinism, they were as conjoined like twins. The only problem was Lenin didn't live long enough. And great evil was done in the name of that type of secular humanism. Let's look at North Korea, the Juche idea. Man will solve our problems. This is the fundamental idea that was brought to North Korea by Kim Jong-il. We know the evils that take place now in North Korea under that leadership. And I know I'm bringing some pretty extreme examples, but I have a point to this. Adolf Hitler said, "Do not believe that the National Socialist movement is just a movement of politics. No, it will bring mankind anew." And I don't think I have to tell Gabor or anybody else what that new mankind represented for over 6 million homosexuals, gypsies, Poles, and Jews. It was a horrific experience for the people who have to live through that. But that was supposed to be mankind anew. So you see, I believe, and having traveled to the Soviet Union myself and spent 3 months there, I believe that if you don't believe in the God of Abraham or Isaac and such, you will find your own God to worship. And the people of the Soviet Union did that for a number of years. They lined up, and I was there, they lined up in minus 30 below for 3 hours to look at the body of a dead corpse, Lenin's mausoleum. They still do it today. Maybe the lineups aren't as big, but one of the most debated issues in Russian society right now, Putin just tried it recently, was to bury Lenin, to take him out of the mausoleum and put him in the ground. And still, 60% of the people in Russia, having lived through what they lived through, they are still opposed to taking that dead corpse out of that mausoleum and putting him in the ground where he belongs. You gotta wonder what these people are thinking and what they're doing. Why are they standing in line for so long to look at a dead man? Because we all have a need to feel something, some worth in our society. They do it in China, they have Mao entombed, they do it all over the world. And I followed that ideal for quite some time in my life, and which is why I say that I was part and parcel of people being killed. You know, and I'm not sure what I would have done if I stand here today, if the Communist Party in Canada would have succeeded. And they would have handed me a AK-47 and a rifle and told me, you must go out and do what is in the name of the proletariat. You know, I stand here today unashamedly saying, I'm not sure what I would have done. And I'll finish off here, I was with a woman in Cuba recently, and she's a Jew. I met her from here in Calgary, and we were talking about the horrors of the Holocaust and everything that was done. And I agreed with her, let us hope that that never happens again. But you know what the real biggest horror of the Holocaust was? Is that how many people stood by and let it happen, including Christians. People were standing in parks. I know a German couple who lives in Vancouver right now, where there were children during the Holocaust. And it was being talked about, you know, that they were burning Jews, they were cremating them, they were gassing them, and they just looked and went, that's not possible. Human beings could never do that to each other. And as the proof came out more and more each day, as more and more people escaped from the camps and the stories became more and more real, they still denied them. This can't even be possible. There were people that lived only 5 miles from the gas chambers that have the ashes of the Jews falling on their houses. And they still denied and refused to admit it existed. And to give credence to what Gabriel was saying, there's a saying that goes, sing louder. I don't know if you heard about that. When the trains went by, the pastor in the church, as the trains went by to the gas chambers, he'd tell the people to sing louder. So you didn't hear the trains go by. Those trains were full of Jews on the way to the gas chambers. So yes, I'm ashamed many times of what my brothers and sisters in God have done in the past. But you know they will have to stand in front of a justified God one day. And they will have to answer for what they have done. That is the essence of Christianity. I cannot answer to what my brother and sister have done on this earth. I can't. And I am just as sinless as Adolf Hitler. That's why I need Christ. That's why I need a Savior. And I'll really close and urge my friend Corey to look a little deeper in his secular church, because I think, and Corey, this isn't a personal attack on you at all, but I think a man that is educated in the biblical premises that you were educated in, you will know. And people say this a lot. They say, why was this said in the Old Testament and this was said in the New Testament? I think in all honesty, you would know why. There was their old rabbinical law, which was the Old Testament law that was prior to Christ. And yes, there were a lot of laws that they were expected to live by. Don't take your donkey across the road on Sunday. God had his own reasons to try to keep some law and order to a small population on earth. But we also know what the new law was when Jesus Christ came. He says, turn the other cheek, love your neighbor as yourself. That was that, and the rabbis would ask Jesus, what is the most important law of all the Torah? And he would turn and say, love the Lord your God as you would love yourself and your man. I may not have that exactly right, but it was love the Lord your God, and I think your brother, yes, that's right. So, this is not the end of it. We're not going to see the end of people abusing the life that God gives us on the earth. We're not going to see the end of people raking in millions of dollars while they stand on a sermon pedestal and bring in all this money. You're going to see it. I'm going to see it. It's going to continue. But really, when it's all over, and this I will finish with, when it is all over, and it will be over for each and every one of us one day, we're going to have to stand before the God that did create us and give an answer to why we denied his existence. And people say, well, prove to me there's a God. When you get up tomorrow morning and see that big red ball floating in the sky, that if it was only 2 miles closer to us, it would burn us like a cinder, or if it was another 100 miles away from us, we'd all freeze to death. I think that's your answer. Where is God? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Merrill. We appreciate your input. So does anyone else have anything they'd like to say on the issue of morality? Is it possible with or without God or religion? I can't believe that nobody in the audience has a viewpoint on morality and God. We see so much happening today. We have this gentleman here in the red shirt. Come on up, sir. And your name is? Adam. Would you like to use the stand or just the mic?
Oh yeah, I'll just use the mic. It's actually more of a question here. I'm an atheist, and I have been through religious circles all my life. I guess you can hear me better now. Yep, I am an atheist. My name is Adam. I used to be a Christian. I am now an atheist. I've been through numerous religious circles. And at the end of the day, when we look at the topic of morality, I find that the Christians and basically any kind of religion seems to have a double set of standards, right? So, gentlemen, again, my question is with an infallible God, how could such an infallible God possibly have made a Bible that is so contradictory in terms and advocates one instance of correct and then by the same token turns around in the next breath and says a completely different thing? I think one of the examples is the 10 Commandments in Exodus, where one version of the commandments is created. And in the very next breath, after those tablets are destroyed, he comes up with a completely almost different version of the Ten Commandments. I'll leave that question to you to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any of our panel like to answer that question? Nobody wants to answer that question? Could you reframe the question a little more so our panel seems a little bit confused by what your actual question was? You can just say it and I'll repeat it if you want.
Sure, not a problem. My question is about the Ten Commandments.
The question is about the Ten Commandments.
The Ten Commandments where in Exodus, God had created the initial commandments, and after the tablets were destroyed, a new version of the commandments were created in subsequent verses.
Okay. The question is about the Ten Commandments and the original creation of the Ten Commandments, and then how they were changed in subsequent, so in the Testament. Okay, here we go. Thank you.
Thank you.
I edit my own work all the time, okay? So maybe that was what he was doing. I don't know, and I'm not familiar with that particular issue. But there are many supposed contradictions in Scripture, some of which I've struggled with over the years. One being that in a gospel, Judas hanged himself, and in the book of Acts, he fell on a knife, fell on a sword. I struggled with that. But can't these supposed contradictions work together in harmony? The only logical explanation is that he tried to hang himself, it didn't work, and he finished the job by falling on his sword. Most contradictions in the Bible are explicable if you look for the answer, and that is my. I mean, and there are many supposed contradictions, many of which can be addressed if we had time and the training to do so, which I don't, but that is one that I am familiar with.
No, that's okay. Thank you. Okay, so now we have a few more speakers who would like to come up and have their say. We'll have Mohammed. Oh, we're starting to know the names, eh?
Oh, I'm sure, yeah.
Okay, so hit it one extra time.
Sorry. No, it's good. It's good, yeah. Okay, so my name is Mohammed Hassanin. I've been here several times. Excellent discussion today. I think really, really well done from all the speakers. I just have a few thoughts I want to share with you. Of course, my name is Mohammed. I'm a Muslim. If you go to the Home Depot, and you buy a closet, you're most likely get in a box, and it's mostly like into several pieces. And with that box, you get instructions, a piece of paper with instructions on it. Now, the reason for the instructions is that when you take it home, you basically know how to set up that closet. Now, this is very similar to us humans today. This is my belief, that we have a role on the earth, and that is to follow God's word. When God created us, He gave us a set of instructions, and these instructions came through the Torah, came through the Bible, came through the Quran. This is the first thought I want to talk about. The second one is regarding morality and what is right and what is wrong. When I was in high school, we read Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark. And one of the quotes I remember is, "There's nothing right or wrong, but thinking makes it so." So if you want to think about something as being right, you can make it right. And if you want to think about something as being wrong, you can think about it as being wrong. And as a consequence, what I think we need is some kind of foundation, some kind of a baseline from which to work with. And this is where the religious texts come from. The common misconception is the religious texts are there to basically govern our modern society. The reason they were made is to govern the societies in the past when these texts were given to the people. The specifics of these texts were instructed, or I guess were put towards the people at the time. But the generalities, the big picture, The big picture is what we should take and carry with us as we move forward. Now, of course, some people talk about the strife and the harm that some religions produce. I want to ask a question: why is it that you blame the religion? Why is it that you not blame the actual individuals who misuse the religion? If you can talk about the Islamic extremists, you can talk about the Christian domination of the various parts of the world, and so forth and so on. Therefore, it's not the religion that's actually the problem, but rather the individuals who go too much into the text and not get the general or basic idea that you should not kill, you should not steal, you should not commit adultery, and so forth and so on. And I think one of the major reasons why we have an increase in atheists or non-religious individuals in general is because of this small minority within each of these religions that are actually that are basically painting a wrong picture of each of these faiths. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed. Always enjoy your viewpoints. We have a gentleman here in the blue that would like to step forward and have his say.
I'd like to thank you guys for coming out. This was really good. This is my first time coming out to one of these events, and great speeches all around. Thanks a lot. There's many ideas were expressed on the floor here, and I'd like to just tackle a couple of them. I have a fundamental understanding of what it is to be an atheist because I'm also an atheist, and I've always been an atheist. Have I ever been in church? Yeah, one or two times, but I found it unfulfilling. So, as a completely secular person, I hear your speeches from the religious side, and I wonder if you guys have ever met people like us. We are good people, and to suggest otherwise is almost offensive and demeaning to who we are, which goes along the same lines as referring to black people as subordinates or lesser people during the slave trade, or today's homosexuality debate, whether or not it's moral or not. Are they people? Are they not? Yes, they're people. So are black people. So are Jews. But fundamentally, I think there's a great misunderstanding of what it is to be an atheist and what an actual atheist accomplishes. We're considered evil and defamatory or just bad people all around. And truly, there may be a few who are. Hitler was not. Hitler was a Catholic. Everybody knows this. So were the Nazis. Very much a Catholic organization, supported by the Pope at the time. So an atrocity such as the Holocaust sort of falls in the lap of the religious right. We can talk about Mao, we can talk about Stalin, we can talk about Kim Jong, North Korea. Granted, there are instances of these atrocities happening, but I think they're greatly outweighed and deeply regretted greatly outweighed by the acts of the religious and deeply regretted by those who are not religious. I think a great idea for churches is to actually invite atheists into their church to have a discussion. Recently, I actually participated in said discussion where a group of young people gathered and listened to us, a few of us, as atheists. And what I discovered was there's a complete misunderstanding of who we are. They think we're demons. They think we're evil. We're not. And to prove that, we had to sit down and have that face-to-face conversation. And having a dialogue is the first step of understanding and educating yourselves. I really liked your speeches. Immanuel Kant, great father of ethics. Read more of his material because it sort of contradicts what your speech was talking about. Same with Bertrand Russell, great secularist. Read more of his stuff if you haven't. I'm not saying you haven't, but it's really great. And that's all I got to say about that. Sorry, guys. Thanks.
I don't know your name, but I appreciate your point that atheists, Jews, and blacks are people too. Who knew? Who knew? I'm joking, of course. I'm totally joking. Please do not take me seriously. But there's 4 questions on the board in front of us, written by members of the audience today, and we have an opportunity to answer them. I'm gonna go first and pick the third one because it leads into, it's very much part of what you're saying. But do atheists believe they can be as good or evil as theists? I was raised by an atheist. He's one of the best men I know. He's honorable. He would say shit if he had a mouthful of it, but he was one of the most honorable people I've ever known. But that said, one day he will face God and be judged according to his relationship with him, what he's done with his son, whether he's accepted him, whether he's rejected his offer of salvation. But do atheists believe they can be as good or evil as theists? Of course they do. And they actually can be. They can be better. They can be better than theists. But there's more to it than just being good people. There's motive. There's the fulfillment of God's will for our lives. I believe we all have one, and so on and so forth. But anyhow, thank you for the question, whoever asked it, and we'll pass this on to someone else. Want to speak? Oh, you want to speak? Come on up.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Come on up, honey. Sorry, I'm trying to moderate and do everything at once. We usually have 2 moderators.
Just showed up at the last moment. Yes, my name is Anka. I'm not a practicing religious person. I do have a code of morals, and I'm looking at all the examples that were given, and I'm wondering, is a dictatorship, military or communist dictatorship, moral? Because it's not. And that's why there are the examples like Germany was one party, one terror government. So that's why I'm saying morality can exist when you have a democracy, and when all the religions none of the religions dominate, or none of the atheists dominate, and society is held together by a common set of laws and by a strong education system. So people don't do bad things because of the law. They have it built in them through their experiences, and not through church, through their own personality, they develop and progress, and they don't transcend the law. I'm also thinking that there is no way to measure morality because society keeps changing. And that's why in a democratic society, you have lawmakers who are accountable to people. And people can, at the grassroots level, can lobby for a change of an unjust law. There is international pressure as well for unjust laws. So it's a whole system that moves in, and society moves. That's why you don't have a linear system. That's why sometimes religions have this ancestral, the chosen people. How many chosen people we are? We're too many. We have to be kept together by a set of shared values, because otherwise the Christians will kill Muslims, Muslims will kill Christians, Buddhists will kill Muslims, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. We have more conflicts now because of religion than we've ever had. We're closer. We're getting closer and closer. I think a moral system and respect for the many flavors of people in this world will make us survive. I think morality is also key to survival, because if you don't have a set of rules, then you don't have anymore. Anybody can do whatever they want, and that can kill whoever they want or enslave. So I think morality is a question of survival for society. And there are no chosen people. There are no right or wrong people. I think and what you become, it's your own responsibility. So, and that doesn't, if you have a God that's overseeing you, it just is no more your responsibility. If it's only your church that keeps you from doing wrong things, it's not enough. I think immorality is something that we keep building, and we'll have to struggle with in a very diverse society where there's so many conflicts. I'm saying in general about our world, and how conflicts in one part of the world can start at opposite ends within minutes. Reactions to an event that happened somewhere else can impact in another part of the world and kill people in another part of the world. So I think that we all have a responsibility towards morality and towards each other, regardless of who we are and what church we're part of or what church we're not part of. And we shouldn't wait for the cops to tell us what's wrong or right, because that's bad. It costs a lot. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Annika. Do we have anyone else who'd like to make a statement? Michael, you had come up. Did you want to say something?
I'll say something real quick.
Sure, come on up.
Hello everyone, my name is Eric Sliker. I have a lot of things on my mind. I'm very glad that I see this group of people coming together to talk. It's a good thing. So I just want to go right on topic and talk about the Hegelian dialectic. And that's how the power elite control us. It's not through religion. Well, they do one way, but you got to realize both sides are controlled. And there's think of it as two puppet masters, and they control both sides. Okay, because as we know, okay, we spent the last 10 years fighting the war on terror. And now it's acceptable for the United States to back CIA rebels. How can we spend 10 years fighting war on terror, fighting these people that allegedly did what they did, but now we can secretly fund them through our CIA or whatever way we're doing? Because that's now what it is. Because now they're doing that with Syria, and they're trying to take Syria down. In fact, the United States is even waking up on this one, okay? Because they are backing Vladimir Putin. So that's what it comes down to. So as a global society, we're waking up. We realize things that we need to work on as people, regardless of our skin color, regardless of our religious faith. It doesn't matter. We're all humans. We don't have to listen to any oppression. It doesn't matter. So very simply, when you see a conflict that's an armed conflict, don't see the left and the right, okay? Don't see the liberal versus the conservative or whatever. See the higher picture, see the actual, and what it comes down to is money. Very, very quickly, the Federal Reserve, people are like, I work for a network marketing company, so they always say, well, that's a pyramid scheme. No, correction, sir, you were born in a pyramid scheme, okay? As soon as you were born, as soon as you were put on the hospital bed, okay, you're paying taxes. That's 2% interest for every dollar created. That ends up in some rich, you-know-whose, I almost swore there, you-know-whose bank account. Okay, because the Federal Reserve is a privately owned company. 300 families own shares. They control the Canadian bank. That's what it comes down to. They control the Canadian bank. So you guys are waking up, going to work, we all work hard. Okay, we all work out in the Canadian cold or whatever it is, we work, we get sick of it. We're out in the park right now, chilling, enjoying ourselves. You gotta remember, a third of your money is being taken by these guys. At least, more. And then count all the other tax on a tax on a tax. Okay, sorry, what the topic is? Morality, okay. I'm becoming a better person. I'm gonna do something about it. I went off topic. I love you all.
Hold on, before you go. And we are having this every Sunday at 1:30, Speaker's Corner, and Merrill is kindly stepped up to throw it next week, as our other moderators will be out of town. And so he's going to give you a little information on it.
Yeah, I will. Just at the end here. I wanted to try to, that was very emotional for me at the very beginning there, and I'm glad I got to say what I had to say. And this is just kind of to try to answer a couple of the questions that the man in the red shirt had and a few others. You know, Christ saw hypocrisy, and I know that pretty much anyone I ever meet that was in the church and leaves the church, it's because of hypocrisy. And one of the most fundamental criticisms that Jesus Christ had in the New Testament were actually against the leaders of the church. If you read that, I think it's in Matthew, when he calls them, "You brood of vipers." He was talking about the leaders of the Jewish church at that time. He said, "You brood of vipers, you hypocrites, you snakes. You come out and you pray in front of everyone to be seen. And he says, but I tell you, worship your Father alone by yourself. Don't be standing there in front of everyone making a big scene. Look how holy I am." That was his strongest criticism, was to the leaders of the church. So you're right. Many times the leaders of this church, or the church in North America, are gross hypocrites. But I heard, and you know, and people have said to me, if Jesus Christ was here today and walked into a church, how many people would stop him at the door? And I have to admit, brothers and sisters, that the church I go to, and I'm not going to name it, it's a pretty popular church in this city. It's very big. But I see people walk in, and they're walking in to be seen. They got the jewelry on, they got the suit, and everyone sees me today. Would Christ himself be stopped at the door? You know, I knew churches back in my hometown of Kamloops that stopped prostitutes from entering the door because they weren't clean enough. Ladies and gentlemen, who did Jesus Christ hang around with? Mary, the prostitute. I'm not talking Mary, the mother of Jesus. I'm talking Mary, the other Mary. Mary Magdalene. She was a prostitute. And what did they say to Christ all the time? You hang around with the tax collectors. You hang around with the prostitutes. He didn't hang around with the Pharisees and the leaders of the church. And I remind you one other thing as well, he said, I come not to bring salvation to the righteous, but I come to bring repentance for sinners. He wasn't reaching out to the people who thought they were holier than thou. He was reaching out to the people that we so often put aside, the people that are sitting on the street corners here trying to make a living of it. And so I really urge you, when you're angry at something and you see something in the church, we all could bring hypocritical examples. Jack Layton was the leader of the NDP in this country, a man to represent the poor, yet him and his wife were caught living in low-cost housing. They were making over $100,000 a year as counselors, living in low-cost housing. Now they moved out after they brought a number of excuses as to why they did it. But do I blame the entire NDP movement for what Jack and Olivia did? No. Even though I'm not a socialist NDP member, they've done some good in our society. They brought about some good in this country. So I'm not going to swap the whole swath and say they're all wrong because of what one little thing that Jack and Olivia did. So I urge you really to look into the heart of the matter. And I certainly hope the church I go to will never stop you at the door. And I welcome my brothers and sisters of the atheist movement. I attend Center Street Church. I welcome you to come with me there anytime. Anytime you wish. There you go. You know, it's not perfect because the church really, ladies and gentlemen, is a group of people come together to worship God. And the church back in Christ's time were meeting in little houses. They weren't these big mega churches of 3,000 people. There were about 8 or 10 people meeting in a living room. They had to do it because they would have been killed if they were caught after Christ left this earth. So it really wasn't big mega churches. Now, on to this event. It's still in the very early stages, the event that we're trying to plan for next Sunday. But what I kind of came up with a little colloquialism, and this isn't meant to make a joke about the conflict in the Middle East, because it is no joke between the Israelis and the Palestinians, but I kind of came up with the line of whose land is it anyway? Kind of maybe lighten the tone a bit, because we've had one here for Syria. It got pretty heavy. I'm not blaming them, but these are emotional subjects, ladies and gentlemen, when you start talking about land historically behind people in the Middle East. But I've talked to Gabriel several times, and we've agreed on this to try to get something together on the issue of the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. What way forward? So I'm working with my friend Mohammed here to try to maybe see if we can put this together and maybe get I've agreed to take the pro-Israel side. See if I'm sure it can't be too hard to find someone on the opposing side in Calgary. And if you are interested in in what has happened down there, there is a very interesting speaker here in Calgary tonight. There may still be tickets available. Is Gilead Shalat. Gilead Shalat was an Israeli soldier held in Hamas captivity for over 5 years with no Red Cross contact whatsoever. He was released when the Israeli government agreed to release 100 Palestinian prisoners. He's speaking at the Best Synagogue tonight at 7 o'clock. So we're hoping on an Arab-Israeli conflict discussion next Sunday, and we'll do our best to make that happen.
Thanks for that, Meryl. We really appreciate you stepping up to do that. Was there anyone else who'd like to come up and talk about morality? Is it possible without church or religion? Yeah, Judy, you like that one, huh?
I'll say.
Did you want to come up and have your say, honey? A lot of people have already. Come on up. And then we're going to have Corey is going to debate the 4 questions that were brought up by one of the other speakers. Those were brought up by one speaker.
Okay, I jumped in, didn't hear what everything was said. Morality is a big issue for me because a lot of really, really good people are doing something what they think is morally good, and it's actually causing more harm. Residential schools was the morally right thing to do, and yet years later we see how much harm that was done. So I think that you have to have morality in everything, but we better have to define what is moral and what isn't. I'm suggesting that something that's morally right does not cause anybody out there harm, mentally or physically. If it causes harm, it's morally wrong. If you're a church, if you're anything else, any kind of group, if this, I'm kind of against democracy because it does have the root of please 51% at the cost of 49%. It doesn't work because it's going to cause harm to somebody, but because it's causing harm to few people, not the majority, we cause harm. So the greater good is every single freaking person on the planet, not just a selected few. That's what I call my morality. And if it's not found in a church, which I don't believe they do because they hand out free food while earning a lot of money that causes homelessness for people that need food, I would work on your morality of get rid of the why people need food instead of giving free food out. That's my thing.
Our moderator has stepped away, but I understand Corey wishes to respond to the 4 questions, and everyone else for that matter.
Hi. In case you weren't here earlier, my name is Corey Peters. I'm co-founder of the Calgary Secular Church. We got some 4 questions here, which I'm going to try and answer. The first one is, what good can come from removing morality's existence from religion? I have no idea what good might come from removing morality from religion, and I suppose I don't really care either. I don't know that religion is necessarily always a beneficial force. So I don't know that necessarily makes sense. I'm not sure what you were trying to get at there. I have no idea what would happen if you'd move morality from religion. It probably wouldn't be good. There seems to be some evidence that humans need some instruction in morality. We don't just all get it built in. So the next statement is, why is the statement "In God We Trust" in the U.S. Constitution? Unless I'm mistaken, it's not. I don't think the word God appears in the Constitution anywhere in the U.S. The word, it was very much founded in the spirit of the Enlightenment by secular people. There was a lot of pressure to put the word God in the Constitution, but it was always resisted. The words "In God We Trust" appear on American coinage, but that's only been the last 50 years or so, and was a result to the supposed evils of communism, as opposed to U.S. being founded on a biblical standpoint. Number 3, do atheists believe they can be as good or evil as theists? Well, If you heard my speech earlier, I absolutely believe that they can be. I think a secular ethical system is superior to a religious one, mainly because it's evidence-based, and if we get something wrong, we can change it and get it right. The last one is very interesting. Can morality be quantifiably measured? I'm going to hedge my bets a little bit and say, with current technology, no. But I think it's definitely viable in the future, possibly. If we say morality is a question of pain and happiness, I suppose you could ask somebody, well, I suppose they do this, back me up if I'm wrong, anyone in healthcare. In hospitals, they say, how much pain are you in? Give me a number between 1 and 10, and they will do so. I suppose we could do that. I feel like there's something else behind that question, though, and I'm missing what it is. Would it be beneficial to quantifiably measure morality? Anyone? Yes. It would be beneficial. I think you're probably right, and I do. There is a pervasive thought in our society, and I'm just going to ramble on for 45 more seconds, I promise, that somehow things are getting worse, and nothing could be further from the truth. We live in an age of such unmitigated happiness and joy compared to what it used to be. I mean, if you consider the fact that women are fully people now and not just movable property like they used to be. This is an important development, and we don't keep slaves anymore. This is an important development. And 99% of our children survive past the age of 5 when it used to be just 5%. This is an important development. There's so much good that science and rationalism has brought to our world. The fact that we can look around and say, we can prove from our genetic code that we are fundamentally no different from every race. That we have a scientific basis to say that racism has absolutely no standing. We have come a long way. We have come a long way from the way that it was. And it's so much better now than it used to be. The violent death is down, crime is down, rape, pillage, murder, every possible evil in the world is down compared to how it used to be. There are certainly more people, and we have way more access to knowledge about bad things going on, but the actual rates per capita is down all over the world, and this trend I hope will continue. You will notice, I'm not saying correlation is causation, but you will notice that the countries that are the happiest are the countries that are the most secular and the least religious. So I think there's some evidence there. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
I can't let Corey have the last word, I'm sorry. But he said that scientists, the world is a better place because of scientists. That's true, but a lot of those scientists were Christians and Muslims and theists. Yes, they were. And they understood that science was in reality thinking God's thoughts after him. They didn't invent atoms, they discovered them. They've been around forever. With that, I will close. Thank you. And turn the mic over to... somebody's going to take another question.
Thank you very much. Sorry. Trying to field some other people who've been putting out some interesting things for upcoming events. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to today's topic on morality? I don't know. Whoa. What's that? Okay. Sir, come on up, Jude. We're just asking me a question.
2 seconds.
Your 2 seconds are up.
When we say things are getting better, maybe they're getting better for you. But ask homelessness, poverty, those that are victims of war. War has increased. We're seeing more people die and suffer than ever before. So you can see things one way, but you can also prove it another. If you're saying life is better, it's only better for you at the cost of causing harm to someone else. You need to look outside of yourself.
Very good point. Thank you. Steve now is going to close things out for us by answering the 4th question.
There's these 4 questions up here, and I was just asking to find out if we could find some kind of quantifiable measurement for scientific morality. And the question is, can morality be quantifiable? So in order for an atheist to assign morality, scientifically, you have to have definable measurement. Now, morality, like art, means drawing a line someplace. Oscar Wilde said that. And in order to measure morality, we need a definition of good and bad. And this allows us to form a line in the sand, where we assert the ultimate end of a scale. And the one question is, what is truly good that a being can do? And as we have seen out here, we have multiple ideas. There is no plausible way of defining measurable morality for an atheist. We see it right here. Science, as we've simply seen, cannot define morality. And as science supports the non-believer, true morality cannot exist with an atheist. If any group can conclude that there are 2 scientific things which define the ends of a scale, then they have concluded that morality can be quantified. However, throw 2 more people into that group and the results change, breaking the ability to quantify morality. The more people, the greater the variance and distance between the ends from a conclusive morality. Because there are individuals all contributing their ideas which they believe is good and bad, they can only conclude that their belief of morality stems from a higher being, as the definition of belief outlines. Therefore, morality cannot exist without the belief of God and religion. The ability to see beauty is the beginning of moral sensibility. What we believe is beautiful, we will not wantonly destroy. Reverend Sean Parker Dennison. Evidence that individuals possess different beliefs. Therefore, it's impossible to quantify morality. It becomes the never-ending story. I challenge anybody to come up with anything that could disprove that. With the idea of stirring up shit.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, the moderator has deserted us, so it falls upon me to conclude. Thank you for your attendance. We're going to play some music now just to wind down and remove the equipment, and feel free to linger and speak amongst yourselves. Thank you. We'll have, this thing goes on every week. If you have any ideas in terms of topics or speakers that you'd like to see, please place your suggestions in the suggestion box. And thanks again. Have a great day. All the best. Yeah, I should have also expressed my gratitude to all the speakers.